Let's work through review 1. Make sure you have that paper to take any notes on. Remember, you can use this in the test. It is also half of your grade. So make sure that you have anything needed written on that because you can use it in your test. And go ahead and make sure every problem is answered. If you need to attach notebook paper to your review, that's totally fine, okay? So get that ready and let's go. The first section on here is walking through just simple or basic, maybe not simple, that may not be the best word, but basic order of operations. Remember, your steps are parentheses first. Exponents and any square roots will go together there. Then you're going to multiply and divide together from left to right. So even if division comes first, you need to do that first. And then you're going to add and subtract together from left to right. And the reality is, all of you guys know this. The problem is, as you're working quickly and when you let yourself get a little stressed out with tests, you just sort of jump in and start working. So make sure you remember to work in order of operations. Let's do an example. I believe this is the first problem on there. I'm going to work some of the problems. You are going to work the other problems. And remember, that packet is half of your grade, all right? So your first problem says 14 minus 11 squared minus 45 divided by 9. Order of operations, we're going to solve our parentheses first. Now we're going to work our exponents. So 14 minus 11 gave me 3. 3 squared is 9. And then we're going to multiply and divide together from left to right. As you're working through this, your instinct is going to be to do 9 minus 45 first. But remember, you multiply and divide first. 45 divided by 9 is 5. And then you subtract. 9 minus 5 is 4. It's going to be very important for your grading for you to show your work. If you get a problem wrong and all you have is your answer, it's going to be worth the whole 10 points or whatever it is. If you have shown me your work and I can see that you simply made a small error, I will not count all of the points off. So as you're working these, practice showing all of your work. It's been a while since you've done this, so let's review greatest common factor and least common multiple. So for greatest common factor, step 1, prime factorization. That's fancy words for tree it. Then you're going to find what they have in common, so circle what matches. Then you simply multiply any pairs. So if I have well, you'll see when we work on. Least common multiple, your first step is the same, prime factorization, tree it. And then for least common multiple, remember the names are kind of switched. For least common multiple, you need to find the most times each number is used. Then you multiply what you've circled. So let's do an example. It always makes more sense when you do an example. We're going to find the least common multiple and the greatest common factor of 12 and 15. And so for the sake of time in this video, I've already treated it. And I have it twice here because we're going to write on these and I didn't want to get confused. So for greatest common factor, let's do that one here. For greatest common factor, we're going to circle what matches. And in this case, they have a 2. I'm sorry, that's not a 2. They have a 3. That means the greatest common factor is simply 3. Whatever you have circled pulls out as 1. So on the previous slide, I said circle your pairs. So if I had another 2 here, and I had a 2 and a 3 circled, then I would multiply that 2 and the 3. Okay? So every pair just pulls out as 1. Now let's do least common multiple here. And this is the one that gets a little weird sometimes. So for the least common multiple, you need each number the most times it's used. So let's draw a line here. I have 2 2s on the top, no 2s on the bottom, so 2's the biggest. I have 1 3 and 1 3, so it doesn't matter which one I pull out. I'm going to pull out 1. I have no 5s and I have 1 5, so I'm going to pull out 1. And then for least common multiple, I multiply everything that's circled. On the top, we only multiply the pairs, but for least common multiple, I have to multiply everything. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 5, I believe, is 60. Let's talk about solving for an unknown, means solving for x. It's almost always x at this level. Step 1 is to distribute. Anything that needs to be distributed in, you need to do that first. Then you're going to add or subtract any like terms so that you have it all simplified before you start moving things around. Then you're going to move your variable terms to one side. So anything that has an x, so you're going to move all of your x's to one side. We'd like x on the left. It's just the way our brains function. So if you'll move all your x's to the left, then move non-variable terms to the other side. So any variable, or any term, sorry, that does not have an x. So any numbers move to the other side. Usually we have x's on the left, regular numbers on the right. Remember, when you're moving them over the equal sign, the operation changes. Then you're going to add any like terms you have again. And some people sort of do that as they move them, which is fine. Then you're going to divide or multiply. 90% of the time you're going to divide to get x by itself. Occasionally you'll have to multiply. Let's walk through an example of this. So here's the problem that you have. 7 times x plus 5 equals 28. Step 1, distribute that 7 out. And remember, that has to go to every piece inside those parentheses. So 7 times x, 7x, 7 times 5, 35. Everything is distributed. You should, if you can at this point, add any like terms. We don't have any like terms. You have to remember 7x and 35 are not the same. They do not match. They are not like terms. You know that when we talk about it orally, but again, you're taking a test, you get stressed out, and you're working as fast as you can. Remember, you can only add like terms. So now I'm going to start moving. I need all x terms on the left. Well, I only have one x term. It's already on the left. 7x is already on the left. So now I'm going to move that 35 from the left side to the right side. When I do that, the operation changes. The plus becomes a minus. 28 minus 35 is negative 7. Watch your signs. Those of you who struggle with your negatives and positives, make sure you have your calculator. You will not be allowed to use your phone. Bring a real one and use it. If you're one who makes a lot of mistakes with negatives and positives, use it. Now I'm not finished. X is not by itself. So I need to move that 7 over. I'm multiplying it on the left. When I move it, I divide. Remember, the operation changes, the sign does not. So when I move it, I'm still dividing by a positive because the operation changes, the sign does not. Negative 7 divided by 7 is negative 1. Solving inequalities. So first of all, an inequality is like a greater than or less than. And you treat it just like an equal sign. You solve it just as if that inequality symbol was an equal sign. The only thing you have to remember is if you divide by a negative, the direction of that inequality or the alligator mouth flips. Let's work through one of the examples. 3x plus 11, just pretend is an equal sign, equals 17. Move the 11 over. My x term is already on the left, so move my non-x's to the right. When I move a plus 11 over, it becomes a minus. 17 minus 11 is 6. Now to get rid of that 3, I have to divide. Because I'm dividing by a positive, the symbol does not change. And it's just x is 6 divided by 3, which simplifies to 2. If that 3 was a negative, the sign of that inequality would have flipped the other direction, and the answer would have been x is less than instead of x is greater than. So just pretend it's an equal sign, and remember, if I divide by a negative, I have to flip the direction. The last thing on this review is fractions. And so let's go over these steps real quick. If step, remember sometimes you'll have to do this. If you have a mixed number, you need to convert that to an improper fraction. And that's that wheel where we multiply up, and then multiply, then add and keep the denominator. If you have a whole number, put it over 1. If you're adding or subtracting, you have to have a common denominator. Then you add or subtract your numerator, keep the denominator. If you're multiplying, you just do top times top, bottom times bottom. You do not need a common denominator with multiplication. If you're dividing, remember we keep the first, change from division to multiplication, and flip the second, and then you just multiply. I'm assuming most of you will have your calculators and not even need these, but let's do one. case. Let's do an addition and subtraction one. So I don't have this pre-worked. I'm going to do it by hand. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wheel this. Now, 2/3 is already a plain fraction. 1 and 1/4, we're going to multiply. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Now, because I'm adding and subtracting, I have to have a common denominator. If I was multiplying, I would not, but because I'm multiplying, I do. So what I have to do is look at my denominators, 3, 4, and 2, and decide what they can all become. And they can all become 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 3 times 4. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 4 times 3, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 2 times 6. And then my new fractions are 8 over 12, 15 over 12, 42 over 12, and then I just add and subtract my tops. So 8 plus 15 is 23. 23 minus 42 is negative 19 over 12. If at this point I can reduce, I need to reduce. If I can't, I can leave it. Remember, at this level, we can leave our fractions improper, but that can't simplify, so that's it. Now, on the multiplication, you don't need the common denominator. You just wheel it, then you multiply top times top, bottom times bottom. On the division, put anything over 1, wheel it, keep, change, flip, and multiply. So that was everything from review 1. We'll do review. We will do review 2 in a minute, or for me in a minute, whenever you get to it. Remember to complete the problems on those reviews because that's half your test grade.